Hey there, Jim Johnson for accenthelp.com, and we're working on these Vowel+R lexical sets. Today is going to get a little bit more complicated. This is starting with the square lexical set. The lexical sets are based on the work of J.C. Wells in his Accents of English, Volume 1, where he dives into those. So square words, square, fair, hair, nair for my hair, right? So those are variations on the air, on that square lexical set, right? Now, this one, I don't think that there are huge variations, but sometimes it gets written instead as this lowercase e, which is up here. Now, actually, it's not uncommon to see that in pronouncing dictionaries, partially because the way that that the IPA used to be laid out, the epsilon didn't exist. So they were actually using this because that was the only symbol that represented that sound. Now, I would think of them as a slightly subtle difference between air and air. Air. This is lower in the mouth. This is higher in the mouth. The way the vowel quadrilateral is set up, front, back, top, bottom of your mouth. The schwa is in the middle. Here's where the epsilon is for square. And this is the one that is the symbol that represents the dress lexical set, for example. This is commonly used only in the diphthong for the A sound. A, right? Pay, amaze, weigh. Great. Air. Now, some people actually lean towards using this for, say, RP speakers, Standard British, and in which case it would be non-rhotic. Air, square. Some actually go towards this for that, and then use this for American speech. We could debate this for a while, and I think you can get some variations in various Americans, which one of these more accurately represents it. Actually, I would lean towards this, especially because, if anything, many Americans have a tendency to be very jaw-oriented, and so they start to say things more like what's below that, the ash, where they start to say square, square. Probably not all the way to square, square, square. So it's actually just creeping in that direction for many American speakers. Square, square. Maybe you can hear a hint of ah in there, the trap vowel or the bath vowel, right? So I lean towards not utilizing that for American speakers at least, and going with that because, if anything, of a tendency to lower it. This also gets us into some subsets within this that J.C. Wells doesn't really write out as specific subsets as much, but he hints at them within his work. But what we end up with is, within square, we also end up with three variations of Mary, 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 right? I say them all the same. Square, Mary, Mary, Mary. And when I say Mary, 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 I mean Christmas, and I mean the woman's name, and I mean a wedding. So we have Mary, Mary got married. I would say Mary, Mary got married. They're all the same. And I think that fits generic, and that's actually what most Americans do. Now, primarily when you get up towards the Northeast in the US is where you get some variations on that. The primary variation that you'll hear is a lowering of the vowel as you progressively move through these. And there's a couple of different ways that you can write this. One of them is to take the square and simply stick with that for Merry Christmas, and then add simply the syllable break between them for the woman's name. Mary, meaning that this really gets to exist on its own. Mary, Mary got married. 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 So Mary, Mary got married. That's a little strong. I think a lot of people will actually raise this. Even when they do it, they start to raise that up a little bit. This is a thumbtack that is a diacritic saying it's slightly raised. This would be a thumbtack that means slightly lowered. Okay, I like to use those diacritics in a lot of different things. So one of the ways that I like to describe this is I think the recognition of this is partially about the fact that this may actually get lowered a little bit. So I think these are a couple of different ways to note this. This is the primary one that you'll see in pronouncing dictionaries. I like to utilize this one, and I don't really give a damn if you put a syllable break in there or not. So I'm going to take it out just to piss somebody off. That'll be Devon. Thanks, Devon. Devin's always pissed at me. So this would be one of the ways that I utilize to describe it to people because it tends to help them to make that distinction. Mary got married. Now sometimes you end up with some other variations, like this one tends to work this way in New York, for example, New York City area. But then if you get down to Philly, funnily enough, they start to change this towards the sound so that it's Murray. So that you can't sometimes tell the difference when somebody's saying Merry Christmas, Murray, this guy named Murray, Merry Christmas, Murray. That sometimes like Philly area, you can get that thing that is incredibly different for me. Merry Christmas, Murray, Merry Murray. They would not at all come close to each other, but in Philly and some places around there, for example, you can get where those actually come together. I'm going to take that one away for a moment. So, I'll take this away too. The important thing is to recognize that you can get variations. The first of those being, this is the same as square, Mary, and then we get to marry, marry. In fact, in a New York accent, you might even hear it become marry, marriage. This variation is really important to be aware of when you get into a number of accents. So when you go to accents of England, for example, they are oftentimes influenced by that. And because many accents in England don't say that as much as they say this one that's a little bit lower than that, so that marriage can actually become marriage, ma. Almost like Pakikar and Harvard Yard, marriage, ma. Now, that's not the way they would say it in Boston, but that's sometimes a helpful way to get to this vowel, Pakikar, ma. Well, they got married. Well, they got married. So like you might think of a Yorkshire accent or something like that going towards that. But again, most Americans do something along the line of what I do where they're all the same, Mary, Mary, Mary. That's what you'll hear through most of the U.S., with the primary difference being when you get up to the Northeast. I will also say that I sometimes hear a little bit of that variation that happens in older speakers in different parts of the U.S. Younger speakers throughout the U.S., pretty much, until you get way up into the Northeast, with a stronger accent especially, they oftentimes become just the same, Mary, Mary, Mary. But if you get to, not all the way necessarily to New England, but even in like the eastern half at least of Pennsylvania, you'll tend to get the variation of these three being differentiated. So there you go. Oh, that's the square lexical set with the Mary, 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 Mary subsets. For more info on a generic accent and phonetics, and for any accent actually for actors, you can check out accenthelp.com.